What is up, everybody? Welcome back to RacingNews.com and welcome back to another Kentucky Derby update. I've got Ryan Stillman back with me once again this week. Ryan, you've been so popular, we got to keep having you on. Are you ready for another week of Derby news?
I'm ready for another week. Thanks for the very kind words, Aaron. And man, I really feel like the Derby trail is heating up, especially what's coming next week, what we just saw. Don't you think that's fair to say, Aaron?
Absolutely, absolutely. We get the Southwest coming up. We'll talk about it in a second. It literally just drew as I hit the record button on this video, so we will mention the Southwest. At first, though, we are going to recap the Lecomte Stakes. I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen now. If you missed the race, make sure to go watch it. Disco Time gets the job done. He wins this race by a neck over Built and Innovator. Innovator comes in at third there. Initial thoughts on Disco Time or the Lecomte General? Just your initial thoughts coming out of this race, Ryan. I'll let you kick us off here.
Yeah, why don't we talk about Disco Time to start with? How's that sound? I think he's the big story coming out of this. Wouldn't you agree, Aaron?
I think he's the only story coming out of this. I'll go further in a minute, but yes, let's talk about Disco Time for sure.
Very well put. So yeah, here's my first instinct on the horse, Aaron. I don't know what Disco Time is, but I think we're going to be hearing from him. His sire's not this time. That's the sire last year's Turf Star Cogburn and Marathon Monster Next, amongst others. My point is, I think we'll be seeing him more, whether he's a Derby horse or not, because not this time horses, Aaron, they've shown that they can develop if they stay around longer. Yep. Cogburn and Next did that last year. So let's look at the facts now about him in particular. This horse is now undefeated in 3 starts. I give a horse a lot of respect for having an undefeated record. Until they lose, we don't really know how good they are, Aaron. And this horse went off as the 9-5 favorite, and watching the race, he was the best horse. And so I want to break it down. In my opinion, he did not have a great start. He bumped with other horses on both sides of him at the beginning. He laid well back at the beginning. Maybe it was 3 wide. That's the eyeball test. Then he picked up stride around the 5 path around the far turn. He swung out like 8 or 10 lengths into the lane, Aaron. It was pretty big margin he gave up there. And then he rallied widest into the final furlong and kept coming and won by a neck. So in short, what I observed, this horse had everything conceivable happen to him to cause him to lose, have excuses, while the runners up, they got the trips that they wanted, and they still couldn't beat him. So ultimately, I'm impressed. Now, if you're looking for a Derby horse, Aaron, this guy showed me quite a lot. The Kentucky Derby, it's a rodeo. We all know that. And he showed he can take bumping and go on with it. He showed he can have a less than ideal trip and get the job done. Now the question is, will he be able to have all those things happen and win when he's facing even better competition? That's yet to be seen. But look, the horse definitely can improve with every start. So technically, he should improve off of this. And it's also worth mentioning a few other little minute things on him. I thought that he did all of this over a sloppy sealed track, and that was a very positive for him, Aaron, because the Derby, look, we've seen it. It rains a lot of times in Kentucky at that time of year. So that's another thing you like. I also like that he did all this while having to break from the 11th post. Well, look, it's not the worst spot to break from, but it's still something that you have to overcome. So overall, Aaron, time came back, wasn't mind-blowing. And am I sitting here going, this is the Derby winner? Long story. No, but I like this little horse. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I'm giving him some respect today.
That's why we have him on, folks. That was a perfect breakdown of what happened in that race. I thought that was very well done, Ryan. I will carry on with your time comment. So one thing I love to do and is compare times at the same distances on the same day. I hate when people compare times from 2 years ago to this year and think it's the same. It's not. But when you talk about times on the same day, on the same track, under similar conditions, that's when I think they are really important. So Disco Time runs 147.07. There were 5 races at 1 1/16 on the day. Disco Time was the 4th fastest, which meaning only one other time at 1 1/16 was slower. So that's the bad news. Stir Crazy ran it in 148. That was a 148 flat. That was an off the turf race, ran at 1 1/16. So that was the time that Disco Time beat. Here's some of the other ones. Hit Show ran 144.91 in his win in the Louisiana Stakes. Now, on one hand, Hit Show is an older horse. You would think, yeah, we're going to get a little bit faster time from an older horse right now versus a 3-year-old this time of year. We do know Ryan Hitshow is, good, not great, right? He's solid. He can win races like the Louisiana Stakes. He's not going to win races when he goes into the bigger company, most likely. So he's over 2 seconds faster. Not great. They ran a off the turf race for the males, and Gigante wins the race in 1:45.66. And then there was a maiden special weight in race 7 for 3-year-olds specifically. Hypnus wins the race. First time starter for Kenny McPeak, covers the ground in 1:46.33. So that's about 0.7 seconds faster. Doesn't seem like a lot. That's not a great sign. However, you go back to what you said. There's all kinds of reasons why Disco Time did not cover the ground quite as fast as some of these horses. I'm still very much interested in Disco Time. I have no interest in the rest of them after this unless they show us they're going to rebound and run better. It is a sloppy track, so you can't totally hold it against them. But you said it. Built had a pretty good trip from the 13 hole. No excuse not to win. Innovator got the pace. They didn't go overly fast. They weren't going just terribly slow, but a really good horse. Probably could have got there first if they had that kind of trip. So those two horses I'm kind of out on right now. But Disco Time I'm kind of in on because the trip was brutal. He covered a lot of ground. Like I said, the race was assigned, Disco Time was assigned a 78 buyer. Don't go crazy over that because I just laid out why he pretty much had to get a low buyer. It was the 4th out of 5 as far as times go on the day. Well, you kind of got to work backwards from the fastest time, and that's just kind of where that was going to fall. And again, he didn't get things his own way in any way. So that's kind of the mechanics behind it. I don't really care for the other horses behind him. Somebody should have beaten him on this day. He had all the excuses and he still won. So I think you give Disco Time credit, and the rest of them pretty shaky going forward.
I think that's such a fair assessment. And, I'm going to talk about those other horses behind him. Before I do, a few things that also I think the general public, Aaron, I think are going to latch on to this horse if they are interested in him. Look, this is a Juddmonte horse trained by Brad Cox, ridden by Florent Giroux, and running in a Fairgrounds Kentucky Derby prep race. You cannot help but get flashbacks of Mandaloun, can you? Mm-hmm. Who was, disqualified into a Kentucky Derby win for these same connections and ran in this race, Aaron. Only Mandaloun lost this race and Disco Time won it. Now, it depends who you're facing as well. So all that comes into a factor. I'm not saying that's the same, but it gives you those flashbacks. And last week I said that, if you were going to win the Lecomte Stakes, you had to beat Built. He was the bar. He was the level. He had shown at Fairgrounds, if you want to win here, this is the level of talent you need to rise above.
Yep.
I'll leave it at this. Disco Time is now the new bar at Fairgrounds. And with that being said, I think you have to wonder about the rest of the field here. So look, Built had to break from the 13th post. So that wasn't easy. It's just not. But like you said, I can't find an excuse. After watching the race a couple times back, I don't see much excuse. Now, look, he should have been able to beat Disco Time if he was a better horse. That's like the bottom line for me. It felt like if he was superior and a horse that is even superior to him has all that go wrong, he really shouldn't do anything to finish second here. But I do have to read you an interesting quote and get your thoughts on it, Aaron. Jareth Loveberry, and this is a jockey, and I know these guys just say stuff, but I want your opinion on this. Let's just talk about this first. Here's what his quote was after the race. We got a really good trip. He's talking about on Built. He just didn't quite handle the wet track as well. He just kept fighting through the mud, fighting through it. And to run a second like that, given the way he handled the track, he ran a good race, even in defeat. I did go back and watch after reading this quote. I will say it didn't look like he loved it. He didn't sort of have that acceleration. I didn't personally think it would have mattered even if he did. Like, assuming both horses ran their race fairly, I still edge it to Disco Time. But what are your thoughts on that, Aaron? If you're, looking at that quote about him not liking the mud, do you take any weight in it?
Well, I think when a horse loses and they run over the slop, that's the first thing everybody says. He just didn't handle the track. So there is that aspect of it that's always there. But yeah, look, that is a thing that is a real thing. It could happen to any of them. You could really, hey, let's go on to the next one and maybe we'll get a fast track and things will change. Yeah, that could happen. Our buddy Paul, he asked me this morning, how many horses do you think from the Lecomte actually make the Kentucky Derby? And I went under 1.5, but I paused and said, Built won the Gun Runner. He's second here. He's going to stay down here. I think he can hit the board. In a couple races, he might still make the Derby. I think what we've seen from him is he's a good horse. I don't know if he's a great horse.
I think that's perfectly put. I'm glad to get your take on it. And with that said, we'll talk about another horse who finished in this race a neck behind Built, Innovator. Now, Innovator, he was a horse coming into this race, Aaron, with a lot of question marks. It took him 7 starts to break his maiden, polarizing horse. And last week I came on your show and I picked Innovator as a potential winner along with Built because of what I said. I mean, I was thinking D. Wayne Lucas might be able to sneak up and steal a Derby prep race with him. Some of the reasons I liked him were his top time form number matched Built's, and I told you Built was the bar that you had to beat, and so he could be there. And I also felt that if Innovator could be a close second to Barnes, he might have more class than anyone in the field, because being close to Barnes, that's quite a feat from what I've seen. Now, as you mentioned on last week's show, Aaron, this horse is by Authentic, and those horses are showing up, and they do better going longer. So this horse was not going to be able to get long distances in the maiden races he was winning. Running in, sorry, not winning, trying to win. And here he gets a little longer. So in this race, he finally got the chance to run longer, and he got Jaime Torres back, who's the jockey who won the Preakness for Lucas last year on Seize the Gray. And I was thinking as I was watching it unfolding, my goodness, it's playing out like I think, and he might actually steal this race because they were just letting it all his own way. It wasn't meant to be, but look, this is a nice little horse. And what I mean by that is we have seen this kind of horse before for Lucas. I think I know what he is at this very second. He's just steel, Yep. I think in the hands of Lucas, Aaron, it won't completely shock me if he gets enough points to run in the Derby. Maybe not, though. I mean, I expect Lucas is going to run this horse in a lot of preps. And if he doesn't get the points for the Derby, I expect him to go to the Preakness like he did with Bravazzo or Seize the Gray. We've seen him before is my whole point. I don't want to harp on this, but what I do want to say is, because I did like this horse, this is exactly what I wanted to see the horse do to win the race. It wasn't enough. I've seen enough in that sense, right, Aaron? Like, I now know, like, this was a very good shot and a spot for him. I expect if he goes forward, I'm not sure about him winning races in prep races. I do think he could hit the board and maybe pick up points. But I want to read you Innovator's jockey's quote because I do want your opinion on this. So Jaime Torres says, if he can learn to relax more at the beginning, they won't be able to get him. I could have had a ton of horse at the end if he would have just relaxed. I don't think getting the distance is going to be a problem at all. It was his first time going 2 turns. The horse was taking me all of the way. I took him off the rail after the first turn and was able to get him to relax. But I heard someone coming on the inside, so I took him back to the rail and he grabbed the bit again. I started getting on him as a 2-year-old, but he's a different horse now, so strong. I jogged him 2 miles yesterday and my arms are still burning. I get it, Aaron. This is just jockey talk.
Yeah.
But I kind of want... I wanted to lay out all my things because I did like this horse coming into him, and I wanted to say where I'm at now. Any excuses, any reason to believe it? Because I know you're a Lucas fan, and I just feel like let's discuss him just for the sake of it.
His excuse is he hasn't been good enough, and that's just kind of what it is. I mean, even in the maiden win, the one win that he had, he was dying for the wire. I thought he ran much better than I kind of projected him to run. I thought he broke really sharp. He got out in front. And look, he got to the 6 furlong marker at 113 and change. You got to gallop on and win from that situation, and especially when your main rival who ends up winning the race is out in the parking lot, and you got Built, who's kind of tracking a pretty decent trip there. But at the end of the day, yeah, you got to win, I think, if you're Innovator in that spot. And he sure looked like to me he was going to. I really thought Innovator was going to go ahead and take it. So good horse, a solid horse, but he's going to have a chance to make the Derby because of who he's trained by. That is it. We may see this horse 4 more times before the first Saturday in May. And look, he just has to kind of get that trip and hope to hang on for a little piece of things here or there and kind of back his way into it. But it was odd with him. We had a lot of sprints and we finally stretched him out, and I thought he improved, but I just don't know that he's going to be good enough. But would we have thought in January that Seize the Gray was good enough to win the Preakness and the Pennsylvania Derby? No. So the trainer is going to give him every chance to do it.
Well put. Okay, I think that covers for me anything that deserved kind of talking about in this race. Was there any other horses that stood out to you that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I think Maximum Promise was the last one I want to discuss just very quickly. I thought he ran in spots. At times he was running fairly hard, and at times he kind of was shutting it off. So he was kind of going off and on, off and on. But I thought it was a good enough race for him off the layoff. He might accidentally improve and run a little bit better. But when you talk about Build and Innovator and Maximum Promise, and even Disco Time to some degree, where they show up next and who's there in that next start, I think will be the big determining factor. Overall, I don't think any of these horses are great. I do think though there's a couple that are interesting depending on who's there, what spots they're in moving forward. So that'll kind of close the door on the Lecomte Stakes. I thought it was a fun day of racing, although the rain did kind of ruin a few nice turf races. But overall, I don't really know what we saw. I think we saw decent horses. I don't know if we saw monsters or not. All right, let's quickly go to the top fives here. I will kick off with mine. So I'll run through mine very quickly. No changes here. No changes to Ryan's either. We do have one change to John's. So Patch Adams, number 5 for me. Once again, he has drawn into the Southwest. We will talk about the Southwest here in just a second. Patch Adams is running this weekend coming up. That will be exciting. Number 4, Journalism. The problem with Journalism right now, no works since December 7th, but still going to keep him here. These horses are kind of in a holding period, and I say that every week, and what I mean is, hey, if Disco Time would have been off the screen good, he would be in the top 5. Every week, Ryan, it keeps, hey, okay, let's do it. And then we don't see something that I really love. So Journalism, number 4, Sovereignty, kind of the number 3 as well here in a holding pattern with him, waiting for him after winning the Street Sense Stakes at Churchill Downs. Number 2, East Avenue, 2 perfect races, 1 disastrous race in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile when he stumbled. He is working down at Fairgrounds. We could see East Avenue against maybe a Disco Time. We'll see what happens there. And then the ultimate placeholder of all placeholders, Citizen Bull, right there at number 1, the most unattractive number 1 horse you could put, but he's number 1 for me until proven otherwise. All right, Ryan, go ahead. Number 5.
Yeah, Patch Adams. This horse is a very exciting maiden, and I would hate to drop him out of my top 5 without seeing something more electrifying come along, especially with him running next week. So he's 5 for me for now. Barnes, my number 4 horse. Look, this horse is undefeated and passed the eyeball test in his last start. I think sky's the limit with him. 4 for now. Definitely room for improvement. Number 3 for me, Journalism. Of course, I'm concerned about the training issues, right? I don't like horses missing starts, but for right now, here's how I'm looking at it. I think his trainer, Michael McCarthy, is amazing. And I'm excited to see what he does with this promising son of Curlin. The last time Michael McCarthy got his hands on a Triple Crown prospect, he won the Preakness with him. And that horse was Rombauer, Aaron. And there's reason to believe that this horse could be better than Rombauer, don't you think?
Absolutely, yes.
So for that alone, I'm going to keep Journalism there, number 3 for right now, but I'm keeping a look on things. Sovereignty, okay, Aaron, I was thinking about this. I'm excited that we can talk about this. Mm-hmm. Unless you're Bob Baffert or Pletcher or Cox, it's very rare that you get your hands on what are truly considered Derby type horses in your lifetime. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not sure how many horses we would consider real Derby type horses Bill Mott has ever had in his barn.
There's a few, but not many. No.
And I would agree with that. And I'd say when he had his hands on one last, who was deserving to sort of be in the race, he won that race via DQ with Country House. Mm-hmm. But as far as like a real contender who has all the makings of a horse, so like the maturity at a young age, wanting to get the distance at ground and having the right pedigree plus talent, that's just super rare. Mm-hmm. And this horse has the look and feel of a Derby contender. So what I'm getting at is I'm very excited to see Bill Mott, who I think is as good of a horseman who has ever walked this planet, have this horse, because I think he could be that kind of a Derby horse. And it'll be great to watch arguably the best horseman in the game. I mean, he won the Eclipse Award, for 2023 for his incredible work with Cody's Wish and all those other great horses. It'll be amazing to see what he does with a real Derby contender. For now, that's why I have him number 2, but obviously it's subject to change. And my number 1 horse, Citizen Bull, he sits on the throne again. I get it. There have been flashier horses. The problem for me, Aaron, is the options below him as far as I see it. they have holes in their resume, and this guy just doesn't. To put another horse above him for now, I would have to speculate that the horses below him are better. I can't be certain that the horses we've seen and been excited about can get 2 turns, or in some cases even beat stakes company. So based on what we're seeing develop, I think there's a good chance we see horses start to pick them off. But for now, Citizen Bull still number 1.
All right, Citizen Bull number 1. Then we go to John's, and John does have one change. It does come at the number 5 spot. You've got the scoop on it. East Avenue number 5. Tell us why.
Well, I mean, just bottom line, Aaron, exactly what you said, right? There's been some training issues there. So John is aware of that. And for that, East Avenue takes the 5 spot.
East Avenue, 3 workouts now at Fairgrounds. So that's good. Well, journalism, like I said, December 7th has been the last time we saw this horse on the work tab. Of course, then he won the Los Alamitos Derby a week later, but no work since. So number 4.
Sovereignty. I mean, what can I say? I went on a little diatribe there, but I'm glad to know John feels he's a top 5 as well.
Yeah, and Sovereignty is another. It'd be cool for me personally because I was there with his very first race there at Saratoga, and I'll never forget Vinny Blonde, who we've seen on the channel before and a good friend of the Racing Dudes. Him and I were discussing that maiden special weight that day, and Vinny famously now said, "Wait till this one stretches out. This could be a monster for Bill Mott." So it would be cool if that horse was able to do it. Number 3.
Rodriguez, absolutely a very exciting horse, I think, especially with that 101 Beyer speed figure in his last race. And, Aaron, actually some news came out this week that I wasn't aware of. I was hearing some people talk on a horse show, and they were saying how Baffert was kind of high on Rodriguez, even going way back to Del Mar. So definitely wanted to keep an eye on this. It doesn't seem, from what I'm gathering, that this horse just popped up out of nowhere on the radar.
We'll see where these Baffert horses end up next. And speaking of Baffert, he's got Barnes at number 2.
Well, I mean, and talk about, I'm sure, a horse that's means quite a bit to Baffert based on the name alone, right? I mean, there's no speculation there that seems kind of out of this world. Obviously, when Baffert's horses are named after someone he cares about, you get a good feeling. So two's fine for me. I like that a lot.
Absolutely. And then our number 5, John's number 1, Patch Adams.
Patch Adams, this is what's exciting. I was texting with John, and he said, when discussing my list, you can explain that one of the reasons I have Patch Adams ranked number 1 is his maiden win really reminded me of Justify's maiden win, both visually and time-wise. In Justify's maiden win, he ran 7 furlongs in 1 minute, 21 seconds and change and won by 9.5 lengths. Patch Adams' maiden win was even faster. He ran 7 furlongs in 1:20 and change and won by 10.5 lengths. The way I see it, no one else in this crop has had a maiden performance that compares so favorably to Justify's maiden performance. So pretty cool insight there from John White, I think, Aaron.
Yeah, and I mentioned at the top of the show, I don't care about comparing times of different years of different tracks, so that is meaningless to me. But, the absolute mechanics of it are meaningless to me. But anytime any horse runs 120 and change, going 7 furlongs, that is meaningful. So, it was sharp. He visually looked a lot like Justify, just when you watch him and you watch how he gallops out. So now the thing is, now we get a 2-turn test next. We're going to talk about in 2 seconds here, a 2-turn test for Patch Adams. The 2-turn test for Justify, he looked just as good, if not better. Now we'll see it with Patch Adams. So I'll go ahead. You know what? I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen now. This is the field
before you do that, Aaron.
Go ahead.
I know we're going to go there. I just did think one last thing would be interesting for the viewers at home. After receiving John's list, I texted John and asked him, where would you rate disco times? Like, where does he fit on your list? And so I thought I would tell everyone where John ranks him. John texted back, he ranks journalism 6th and disco time 7th. So I just wanted that out there since we're talking so much about what we saw this weekend.
Yeah, disco time there at number 7 for John. If you wanted to go down to 6 and 7 there, probably fair without really sitting here and trying to think about it. That's probably fair to put him at number 7. I'd say he's a top 10 type contender, so that makes sense to me as well. Now, Patch Adams, here's the deal. When Justify stretched out to 2 turns for the first time, he did it in an allowance race. Patch Adams is going to have to do it in a $1 million. That's right. The Southwest Stakes is now worth $1 million. When I first started to go Oaklawn Park, it was worth a fourth of that, 250,000. So now it's up to $1 million. And Patch Adams has drawn post 7 here for the Southwest. Let me read it real quickly. I'll just go down the field here. The number 1 will be Gaming. Number 2, Publisher. Number 3, Monet's Magic. Number 4, Tiz-tastic. Number 5, Render Judgment. Number 6, Sandman. Number 7, Patch Adams. The coach will have a pair. The number 8, American Promise. And the number 9, Bond Temps. And then Speed King, the runner-up to Cole Battle in the Springboard Mile, will be number 10. Now, first when I look at this, I think, okay, Patch Adams is the real deal. Should get the job done. Here's where I kind of think, okay, here's going to be the interesting thing. What do we see from the rail with Gaming? Do we see the Los Al race and he's just not a 2-turn horse, or maybe he's fallen off form? Or do we see him get back to what we kind of thought Gaming was? And if we do see that, can he challenge Patch Adams? Those are the questions I'm asking you right now. What are your just kind of, I know we're not going to get picks. This race came out 10 minutes ago. Just overall thoughts of this race.
I mean, I'm very excited about this race. I feel like this is going to be a race that gives us hopefully a lot of answers about a lot of these horses. Because look, Gaming's been sort of a good measuring stick for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and for the horses out west. At one point, he was, I believe, the most touted horse out west. And so, look, Gaming coming back, to answer your question, really did disappoint in the Los Al Futurity. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. But he had been fantastic prior to that. Even in his Breeders' Cup Juvenile loss, Aaron, you really aptly stated on a couple of shows here that he had excuses for that, having missed a race in between the Juvenile that might have helped him maybe have some more foundation underneath him. I don't want to misquote you. Is that fair to say that that was part of what you believed could have happened for his loss in the Futurity?
Yeah, it was for his loss in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Yes. Now the Los Al Futurity, there was no excuse, I don't think, at all. I just think he came up dull as can be. So I do think it's interesting. Hernandez ships in with him. I think that's a good sign. But look, I think Flavien Prat jumping aboard Patch Adams is just a huge thing. I love that. Because Flavien Prat was on Gaming as well. And here we are with Patch Adams. And I think that is a very, very huge thing. I think it does kind of tell us he thinks Patch Adams is better. So interesting situation. Could we see an upsetter? It is Oaklawn. We could see it before. You got a couple Lucas horses. Maybe you got Sandman for Mark Casse. He looked pretty darn good.
Really good.
Yeah, maybe we'll see what happens. I tend to lean towards more of a chalky, result here, but I am just very, very excited to see what Patch Adams does, because it's twofold for me. If he is the goods, if we're going to even say his name in the same light as Justify, he should probably dominate the race, right? Or at least win the race.
I mean, that's so well put. As I was sitting there computing this, I was thinking, okay, so let's say you don't want to play him. The smoke, there's fire kind of theory for me. Where there's smoke, there's fire theory is exactly what you laid out. I don't like Prat not coming back on Gaming. Mm-hmm. I also don't know, if he really felt Gaming had a chance here, why he wouldn't come back. It's riding for Baffert, who it's hard to believe in my lifetime won't win another Derby unless you feel that confident in Patch Adams, Look, what I'm getting at is I'm not sure if I'm going to take a swing against him that Gaming's where I'm looking, but it wouldn't shock me. Sandman kind of interests me, Aaron. It's a nice looking horse. I liked his last win at Oaklawn Park. Won an allowance race. It's a Tappet horse for Casse. I think Cassie's as good of a trainer out there, in my opinion, as you can find. I really love his training work. Look, there's a lot of excitement over Patch Adams, though, and I find it hard to sort of really pick a solid horse to upset him here. The DRF reported 5 days ago, Aaron, Patch Adams most recently worked 5 furlongs in 101 and 20 on Sunday at Payson Park. Going in company with and considerably better than the 5-year-old multiple graded stakes winner Hit Show that we just talked about. And like you said earlier, Hit Show, who he outworked in the morning, he ran at 1 1/16 on the same card as Disco Time, and he was 2 seconds faster. That's 10 lengths than Disco Time. Being fair to Disco Time, understand he had a lot of reasons to not run that well that day. However, it does tell you that, this is a serious horse if he's outworking a horse winning races at, as a 5-year-old in the morning. So my point being, all systems look like it's the right move for Prat to be sitting on Patch Adams. And I'm very excited to see what happens here. I'm cautiously optimistic because he does have to get 2 turns, but Cox is on fire right now. And if this is his best horse, I find it hard to believe that he's not the horse to beat here. So I don't know. I have a feeling this could be the first race on the Derby Trail where we go, whoa, that was something special. But nothing will shock me. We've seen that happen before.
We certainly are waiting for that performance. This could be it. It's a massive day. The first massive day of racing of 2025 will be Saturday because of the Pegasus World Cup and everything going on with that at Gulfstream. You are going to have a little bit of, wait a second. Here's the Southwest Stakes. It's pretty damn good. We could see a nice performance. So I'm over the moon excited for this one. I'm ready to move Patch Adams above some of these horses that I've got kind of just in placeholders. Or if somebody else was to jump up and run well, I'm ready for that. We'll see what happens. A couple other things before we go. There's a couple of maiden races to watch out for. The race right after the Southwest is race 11. That is a maiden special weight for the 3-year-olds. It's going 6 furlongs. So keep an eye there. There's some decently bred horses there. I'm not going to go through all of them on this video, but there are a few there. And then I'm going to scroll up here. Don't look at the screen. You might get a little bit of crazy idea as I scroll up. But race 2, and this is the one that I'm really interested in. Race 2 will be at 1 1/16, just like the Southwest. Think about the very start of the show when we said we're going to compare the 7th race at Fairgrounds to the Lecomte, the maiden special weight versus the stakes. Same setup at Oaklawn. I love that they're doing it. Race 2. And a horse named Rapture for Brad Cox is going to run in this race. Rapture was second behind Vassimo at Gulfstream in their debut. We talked about that on one of the Derby updates. Vassimo came back to win an allowance at Tampa Bay Downs on Friday. So a comeback winner out of that race. Rapture was close. We'll see how he matches up here. Flavian Pratt gets the mount on this one as well. So a lot of connections. So it'll be very interesting to compare that second race time to that time of the Southwest and see how that breaks down. So make sure to watch race 2 there at Oaklawn as well. That will be a good one. All right. We're going to get out of here for now for the Kentucky Derby update. It's been a good one. Make sure to watch the Southwest. That's coming up. Now, for the channel, make sure to stay tuned, easy for me to say, to the channel. We've got 3 massive race previews coming up. The Southwest will be one. We'll have a full preview out of the Southwest later today. We will also have the Pegasus Turf and the Pegasus World Cup itself, all full previews for those fields out soon as well. All coming up this week on the channel. So a lot, and I mean a lot, coming on. All right, Ryan, I hope you're back with us next week. I think you will be. So Ryan will be back with us next week. We'll have more Kentucky Derby updates. We'll break down what Patch Adams does. And then guess what? Next week on the show, 3 Kentucky Derby prep races to kind of, semi-preview as we look forward. So a lot going on. All right, guys, thanks everybody for watching this video. Hit the like button if you like it. Hit subscribe. You really like it. Want to get alerted anytime we do videos like this. And most importantly, tune in next week for another Kentucky Derby update.